Whispers of an autumn wind danced through Phantom's Hollow, rustling the curtains as they sighed against the encroaching chill of the night. It was late, and the tavern's usual clamor had settled into a low murmur, a blend of hushed conversations and the soft clinking of glasses. I leaned against the bar, polishing a glass more out of habit than necessity, my gaze drifting over the patrons, my patrons, in the soft, flickering light of the candles. The door creaked open, and a gust of cold air swirled through the room, stirring the flames into a brief frenzy and drawing the eyes of everyone present. He entered quietly, a shrouded figure whose presence seemed to command the shadows themselves. A hood concealed his face, and a heavy cloak draped over his form, but it was the way the darkness seemed to cling to him that tightened my chest with a familiar unease. "Welcome to Phantom's Hollow," I called out, setting the glass down and fixing a smile that felt more like a shield. "How can we lighten your darkness?" He paused, his head tilting slightly as if he was weighing my words, or perhaps the sincerity behind them. "I am called Varys," his voice broke the silence, rough and strained as if each word was pulled from a well of despair. "And I fear my darkness may be too profound to lighten." As I motioned him closer, my heart ached with compassion and curiosity. The other patrons resumed their murmurs, casting glances filled with curiosity and concern. "Then let us try," I said, softer now as he approached the bar. "Tell me about this darkness that follows you." Varys reached up slowly, pulling back his hood to reveal a face marked by lines of sorrow and eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "My world, Shadowmere, has been ensnared by a curse of eternal night. It drains the light, the life, and soon there will be nothing left." As he spoke, the weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, familiar yet always heavy. Phantom's Hollow was more than a refuge for the lost and the weary. It had become a beacon of hope against the dark. And I, its keeper, could no more turn away this soul than I could stop the sunrise. "Stay the night," I urged him, pouring a drink of something warm and strong. "Rest. In the morning, we will gather a team and see about lifting this curse from Shadowmere." Gratitude flickered across Varys's worn face, and he nodded, accepting the drink with a hand that trembled slightly. "Thank you, Cora," he said, his voice steadier than before, "for the warmth of your hearth and the promise of hope." As he settled into a corner where a small fire crackled merrily in the hearth, I turned back to the bar, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. Elias, my old friend and mentor in all things magical, would know where to start. Vincent, whose strength and calm were ever a bulwark against the storm, would be essential. And perhaps it was time to call on Luna and Thorn, whose mastery of light and elemental magic might just tip the scales in our favor. The night wore on, and the Hollow's patrons drifted away, leaving whispers of their own stories in their wake. I cleaned and closed up, my thoughts never straying far from the challenge that awaited us. As the last light was extinguished and the key turned in the lock, I looked up at the stars, their light undimmed by the darkness that threatened another world. The walk home was quiet, the streets of the town bathed in moonlight. I felt the weight of the coming day, of the journey into Shadowmere, and of the lives that might depend on our success. But beneath that weight was something else, a thread of excitement, of purpose. This was what Phantom's Hollow was all about, standing in the light, pushing back the dark. In my small, cozy room above the tavern, I prepared for bed but found sleep elusive. My mind spun with spells and strategies, fears and hopes. We would be fighting not just Shadowmere's darkness, but the darkness that lived in every heart, whispering of despair and defeat. But we would face it together as we had faced all things, as a family, as a team, as a beacon of light in the dark. And come what may, Phantom's Hollow would endure. Tomorrow would be a day of planning and preparation, of gathering allies and arming ourselves with knowledge and magic. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment to just be Cora, the woman who ran a tavern at the crossroads of the world, who believed, above all, in the light. Morning dawned gray and overcast, the clouds hanging low as if mirroring the weight of our impending journey. I awoke feeling both daunted and determined, the remnants of last night's revelations lingering like a fog. As I made my way downstairs, the tavern was silent, the kind of silence that speaks of paused lives and held breaths. Varys was already awake, seated at the same corner table, looking like he hadn't moved all night. His eyes, haunted yet hopeful, followed me as I approached. "Good morning, Varys," I greeted, forcing a cheerfulness I didn't fully feel. "I hope the night treated you well?" He nodded, a small smile breaking through his somber demeanor. "It did, thank you, Cora. I have not known such peace in a long while." "Good." I clapped my hands together, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Today, we plan. We'll gather the best minds and bravest souls I know. We'll need every advantage to lift the curse from Shadowmere." Varys's expression hardened with resolve. "I am ready to do whatever it takes." The first to arrive was Elias, his robes swirling around him, and the scent of incense clinging to his fabric, a comforting smell that reminded me of countless spells cast and lessons learned. Next came Vincent, whose steady presence was a reassurance in itself. Luna and Thorn arrived together, their contrasting auras of light and earth mingling in the air around them. We gathered around the large oak table that had seen many such councils before. Maps were unrolled, ancient tomes consulted. Varys described the curse in greater detail, his account painting a vivid picture of a realm where the very air seemed to suck the light from the stars. "As it stands, the obsidian orb is the key," Elias concluded, his fingers tracing lines of power in one of the dusty grimoires. "Its corruption has spread like a cancer through Shadowmere. We cleanse the orb, we cleanse the realm." Luna leaned forward, her luminous eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "My light can counter the shadows, but the orb's corruption runs deep. We'll need a potent source of purity." Thorn grunted, his rugged face set in a thoughtful frown. "And I'll handle the creatures of darkness. My elemental fire will give us the path and protection we need." Vincent, ever the strategist, was already sketching routes and contingencies. "Timing will be crucial. We strike hard and fast, retreat if necessary, and regroup here." I listened, absorbing every word. Every idea. This was my team, my family. Each brought their strengths, their hopes, their fears. As they debated and discussed, I felt a surge of pride and a niggling fear. The dangers were real, the stakes impossibly high. But we were ready, or as ready as we could be. The portal to Shadowmere opened with a low hum, a swirl of colors that seemed to suck the light from our world into its depths. We stepped through one by one, arriving in a land so robbed of light that it took our eyes precious moments to adjust. Shadowmere was a realm of contrasts. Varys explained that bright flowers and shimmering lakes had once prevailed, but now only withered flora and stagnant waters greeted us. The air was thick and heavy with despair, pressing against us with almost physical weight. Our first encounter with the creatures of darkness came sooner than expected. Shadows detached from the trees, forming into snarling, twisted versions of the wildlife that once populated the realm. Thorn was quick to react, his hands sparking with elemental fire, casting a protective circle around us as we regrouped. Luna's powers shone brightly here, her light spells cutting through the darkness like beacons. Creatures recoiled, hissing, as the purity of her magic seared them. We pushed forward, guided by Varys and protected by our combined magic. The obsidian orb was located in the heart of the realm, atop a hill that once must have offered breathtaking views. Now, it was a desolate peak, and the land around it was blighted and barren. As we climbed, the resistance grew. The air around the orb pulsed with malevolence, a tangible barrier of malice that tried to drive us back. But we were Phantom's Hollow, brave, stubborn, and fiercely protective of our own. "I've got this," Luna whispered, stepping forward. Her hands glowed with a brilliant light, pure and fierce. She began to chant, a spell of cleansing and renewal that I had seen her use only once before, during a crisis that had threatened the Hollow itself. The orb reacted, its surface swirling with dark mists, fighting against the light. Luna's brow furrowed in concentration, her whole body trembling with the effort of her spell. "Hold the line," Vincent shouted, as more shadow creatures launched themselves at our defensive circle. Elias joined in, his chants weaving stronger protections, his staff alight with magical energy. I stood by Luna, adding my own power to hers, a steady stream of will and energy flowing from me to her. Together, we pushed against the darkness, a tide of light against the shadow. With a sound like breaking glass, the orb shattered, the darkness dissipating like smoke in the wind. Light flooded the land, cascading over hills and valleys, restoring Shadowmere to its natural beauty. The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. Flowers bloomed, water sparkled, and the air lifted, free of its oppressive weight. We collapsed, exhausted but victorious, as the inhabitants of Shadowmere emerged from hiding, their faces alight with joy and wonder. They gathered around us, their voices a chorus of thanks. Varys knelt before us, his eyes wet with tears. "You have saved us all," he said, his voice choked with emotion. As we made our way back to the portal, the weight of our triumph was tempered by the knowledge of what had almost been lost. But we had faced the darkness and returned with the light. That was worth every risk, every fear. Back at the Hollow, the celebration lasted long into the night. Stories were told, drinks were shared, and laughter rang out like bells. But as the last guest left and the candles were snuffed out, I stood at the window, looking out at the quiet street. Phantom's Hollow was more than a tavern. It was a home, a sanctuary, and now, more than ever, a beacon of hope in the darkness. And as its keeper, I knew our adventures were just beginning. There would be other realms, other dangers, but we would face them as we had today, together. The quiet that followed the celebration at Phantom's Hollow was profound. As the dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, I sat alone in the now silent tavern, reflecting on the journey and what it meant not just for Shadowmere, but for us. The victory had been clear, and the joy of the Shadowmere folk was palpable as they reclaimed their land from darkness. Yet as I watched the sunrise, a part of me couldn't shake off a certain unease. Power, especially the kind wielded to shatter curses, came with its echoes, its ripples touching unseen shores. "Thoughtful morning, Cora?" Elias's voice broke the silence, his presence as comforting as the light that now filled the room. I smiled, gesturing to the chair opposite mine, just pondering the weight of what we've done. "It's not every day you break an ancient curse." Elias chuckled, settling into the chair with a sigh. "Indeed, not every day, but when such days come, they find us ready. And you, Cora, were more than ready." His words warmed me, easing some of the unease. "We were ready, Elias. It was our combined strength that broke the curse." "That's true, but every orchestra needs its conductor," he said, his wise eyes twinkling. The conversation drifted from the battle to the magic and then to what lay ahead. As the morning turned into afternoon, the tavern slowly came to life again, with the staff moving about, preparing for the day. But the peace was short-lived. The first sign appeared mid-afternoon. A subtle but unmistakable chill swept through the hollow, reminding us of the cold we had faced in Shadowmere. I felt it first, a prickle on the back of my neck, then saw it in the flicker of the lights, and finally heard it in the sudden silence that fell upon the room. Everyone felt it. The patrons paused, glances exchanged, a silent understanding passing among us all. Something was coming. "Cora?" Vincent called from the doorway, his voice low. He stood looking out, his posture tense. "You might want to see this." I followed him outside and stopped dead in my tracks. The sky above, previously clear and bright, was now streaked with dark, swirling clouds, an unnatural, roiling mass that seemed to suck the light from the day. "Another curse," I murmured, more to myself than to Vincent. "Or a consequence," he replied grimly. "Magic of such scale as we used to cleanse the orb. It can disrupt balances, awaken things best left asleep." We watched the sky, the sense of unease growing as the clouds swirled faster. Then, without warning, the world shifted. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and a low rumble grew into a roar as a crack appeared in the very air before us, a tear in the fabric of reality itself, a rift. From the rift poured a darkness so dense and pure that it seemed to absorb the light around it. With it came creatures. Nightmares made flesh, spilling into our world with snarls and roars. "Back inside!" I shouted, ushering everyone back into the hollow. Commands flew, the staff springing into action with practiced ease. The doors and windows were barricaded, magical protections thrown up, every preparation made to defend our sanctuary, our home. As we fortified our defenses, my mind raced. This was no simple aftermath of our previous magic. This was something more, something deliberate. Someone had used our rift as a gateway, a means to an end. The siege lasted hours. Wave after wave of shadow creatures crashed against the Hollow's defenses, each repelled by the combined might of our magic and the fierce determination of its defenders. Luna and Thorn were tireless, their powers harmonizing in a ballet of light and earth, fire and wind. Amidst the chaos, I stood at the heart of the hollow, directing and supporting where I could. With each creature that fell, another seemed to take its place, a never-ending tide of malice. But as the sun began to set, painting the sky in blood and fire, the assault waned. The creatures, their numbers dwindling, retreated back through the rift, which pulsed and shimmered with a malign intent. "We need to close it," Elias said, his voice hoarse from chanting spells. I nodded, stepping forward. "Together, then." Gathering around the rift, the air thick with the scent of ozone and magic, we joined our powers. Elias, Luna, Vincent, Thorn, and I poured our essence into a single unified force. The rift resisted, and the darkness within it swirled, reaching out like tendrils to pull us in. But we were Phantom's Hollow. We were the light in the dark, the shield against the storm. And as one we pushed back, our voices rising in a chant that filled the air, a sound both beautiful and powerful. With a sound like thunder, the rift closed, sealing shut with a flash of light that left us all blinking in its afterglow. Exhausted, we slumped to the ground, the relief palpable in the air. But the victory was tempered by the knowledge that we had opened doors we hadn't known existed, and what had come through might only be the beginning. The days that followed were filled with repair and reflection. Phantom's Hollow had withstood the assault, but the scars were there, both on the land and in our hearts. I spent long hours in the archives, poring over ancient texts, seeking answers that seemed just out of reach. The balance of magic was delicate, and we had disturbed it. There would be consequences, I knew. There were always consequences. Yet, as I watched the patrons return, the laughter and stories filling the tavern once more, I felt a surge of defiance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them as we always had, together. Phantom's Hollow was more than a tavern. It was a beacon, a light in the dark. And as its keeper, I would ensure that light never faded. In the weeks following the rift's closure, Phantom's Hollow became a gathering place not just for the weary and the wanderlust, but also for those intrigued by the tales of our confrontation with the dark. Among these was Alaron, a scholar of ancient and arcane knowledge, whose expertise in dimensional rifts could prove invaluable. Alaron arrived at the Hollow under the guise of a weary traveler, but his true purpose soon came to light. He approached me one evening, his eyes bright with curiosity and something akin to awe. "Cora, your actions have resonated far beyond the borders of this realm," Alaron began, his voice tinged with a scholar's enthusiasm. "The closure of such a potent rift is no small feat. I believe I can offer my knowledge to help prevent such occurrences in the future." His offer was timely. Despite our victory, the unease that something similar could happen again lingered like a shadow at the back of my mind. "Your knowledge is welcome here, Alaron," I replied, sensing the potential for a strong alliance. "We face unknown threats, and your insights could light our path." Thus began our new partnership. Alaron shared with us the lore of rifts, the theories of dimensional stability, and the warnings of ancient texts. In return, we offered him a base from which to explore his theories, a place teeming with the energy of countless realms. Yet, not all were pleased with Alaron's presence at the Hollow. Some patrons whispered of old superstitions, wary of attracting more attention from the darker corners of the multiverse. Their whispers turned to murmurs of dissent, creating a rift of another kind within the walls of our sanctuary. One stormy night, I addressed these concerns by calling a meeting of all Hollow residents and regulars. Standing before them, I felt the weight of leadership more acutely than ever. "We stand on the edge of great change," I began, my voice steady. "The threats we face are unlike any before. But remember, knowledge is our light in the dark. Alaron's presence here is not a beacon for trouble, but a shield against it." The meeting lasted hours, with debates and discussions filling the room. In the end, a tentative acceptance of Alaron was reached. The unity of Phantom's Hollow held, strengthened by honest dialogue and shared fears. Our preparation was not in vain. A few weeks after Alaron's arrival, a new disturbance rippled through the realms. This time it was not a rift, but a storm, a literal one, with winds that screamed of magic and rain that fell like tears from another world. The storm centered over Phantom's Hollow, its eye eerily calm, as if watching us and judging our readiness. Alaron, ever the scholar, was fascinated. "This is no natural phenomenon," he declared as we watched the storm from the safety of the Hollow's walls. It's a convergence, a gathering of energies drawn here by the power we wielded to close the rift. The storm tested us, its winds howling with voices from the void, its rains seeping with the chill of the abyss. But we stood firm. Luna and Thorn harnessed their powers to shield the hollow, their magics intertwining to form a barrier of light and earth. Elias and I joined our powers with Ailerons, weaving spells of protection and stability, anchoring the hollow to the realm's fabric with threads of pure magic. As the storm abated, leaving behind a clear sky and a sense of renewed peace, I knew that this was but a prelude. Our actions had indeed drawn attention, and not all of it benevolent. In the quiet that followed the storm, I found myself at the bar late at night, cleaning up after another day filled with minor magics and major worries. The door opened, and Vincent stepped in, his face solemn. "Cora," he said, joining me at the bar, "you've done well to lead us through these troubles, but I fear the path ahead is fraught with greater dangers. How do you fare, my friend?" I paused, considering his words. "I am tired, Vincent, but determined. We have stood against the dark before. We will continue to stand as long as it takes." Vincent nodded his hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support. "And stand we shall together. For this hollow is not just a tavern. It's a home, a haven, and now, more than ever, a fortress against the coming dark." As he left, I turned to the window, looking at the starlit sky. Phantom's Hollow had indeed become a fortress, a beacon of hope and a shield against the dark, and as its keeper, I would ensure its light never faded, no matter what storms may come.